What happens if the seed of a plant has a small microscopic black dot on it? Needless to say, what happens if the seed of a man also has some black dot on it? The sages spend an extraordinary amount of energy teaching us about the seed of man, where it comes from, why, who. Is there anything we can do about that? Society has changed drastically. We see that people think the opposite of what historically they have. Is there anything we can do about that? Whether it's terrorism, anti-Semitism, the deformed mentality of the LGBTQ and all the types of liberal types of mentalities out there, things have changed. What does it have to do with the seed? And even more so, does any of it connect to the mitzvah of turning our beds after somebody dies? Why do we turn our beds? This and much more is going to be answered tonight, and Bezrat Hashem is going to inspire you, educate you, and invigorate you to be holy, because Hashem is holy. B'Shem Hashem Na'aseh V'Natzliach, Shiur Torah, Bruchim Habayim. We're back here on our Tuesday night Jewish intimacy series based on the Sefer Iggeret HaKodesh by the Ramban, written about 750 years ago. Tonight's shiur will be for the Refuah Shlema for Rabbanit Sarah Bat Anat, Rabbanit Levana Bat Sarah, Rav Ephraim Ben Shulamit, Avimori David Ben Esriya, Imi Morati Doris Bat Zora, and all of Am Yisrael and all the righteous Noahides that continue to contribute and help us do all the wonderful things that the organization is doing. Anyone that wants to help us by sponsoring one of these lectures can go to our website, be'ezrathashem.org. That's beezrathashem.org. It'll be in the description, and you could go and donate over there, sponsor a shiur. Or if you want to help us feed the poor in Israel during the upcoming holiday of Purim, go to a designated website that we made for it, like we do each year, bhpurim.org. B as in Be'ezrat, H as in Hashem, and Purim is PURIM.org. Over there you can contribute as much as you'd like to fulfill the mitzvah of helping us feeding the poor in Israel. Certainly one of the obligations of Purim altogether. So Baruch Hashem, last year we were able to feed quite a few people. We were able to raise around 70,000 or so. The year before that we did about 100,000. Hopefully, Bezrat Hashem, this year we'll be able to raise 200,000 because there's a lot more people. And one of the things that we're trying to do this year is something that we've never done before, which is actually to have all of these wonderful avrechim, these Torah scholars that happen to have also a lot of struggles in regards to financials, study Torah for the sake of all the donors on that Friday for 2 hours. And each one that comes and studies gets some money for Purim. So both you end up benefiting in feeding the poor on Purim, fulfilling that mitzvah, but also getting Torah learned due to your efforts. So anyone that does it certainly benefits a lot more than any other time in previous years. The more you donate, the more obviously you're sponsoring Avachim to study for you. So with that being said, we have Baruch Hashem a fantastic news where the new book Ora Levana, my new book Baruch Hashem, is now in being printed. We're finalizing details on the quantity and everything. We're going to be distributing this once it comes to Israel and to the United States. Everywhere it's in Hebrew only currently, but anyone that wants to sponsor copies of the book and thereby get it obviously for the huge discount can sponsor 1,000 copies, 5,000 copies, 10,000 copies, whatever they want. Anyone that wants to do it, please let us know. This is Bezrat Hashem ready and getting ready, Baruch Hashem. So the first book, Baruch Hashem, had a lot of success. We distributed somewhere around, I believe it was 15,000 copies for free. And Bezrat Hashem, we're looking to do at least double that, if not triple that, with this second book, since it covers every single parasha in the Torah. A lot of new insights, a lot of interesting things. And Bezrat Hashem will also be working on an English version of the books in the coming year. So with that, we have our probably the most difficult series that we've ever done is this series, the series of Jewish intimacy, mainly because there is a obligation for a person that wants to have his Yirat Shamayim, not just theoretically, but also in his actions, to be very careful with the language that they use, not to use the common fresh language, not to discount the issue, not to use inappropriate behavior or language, but even more so because this particular series has a lot of Kabbalah in it. Naturally speaking, there's just an enormous amount of Kabbalah. There's probably more Kabbalah that we've learned and taught throughout these first 17 lectures of this series than all of the shiurim, which is, Baruch Hashem, at this point, thousands of lectures that we've done over the years combined. So there's a lot of interesting things in it. I highly recommend that anyone that is actually listening to these to do everything they possibly can to apply at least some of the stuff that you're learning, because it's just one of those things where you have a extraordinary prize in front of you, but you're only going to realize it's a treasure that once you actually apply it. When you look at it, when you hear it, many times it sounds like it's too much. Many times it sounds like it's impossible, it's far away from you. But believe me that this is one of those things where many people, if not all people, can do at least some of it, if not all of it. At least what we've learned so far. So, in the last lecture, the Ramban taught us about the significance of intimacy between a husband and wife during Shabbat, where even though there are obligations for the husband and the wife to be intimate during the specific times, such as the time of the night of the mikveh, this is if a husband and wife have love among them or between them, and they have really the right spiritual chemistry between them, where the husband is constantly letting his wife know how beautiful she is, how amazing she is, how wonderful and how grateful he is to her. Literally doesn't have to have a reason to do it, but he's constantly looking for ways to make sure that his wife feels like she is the princess of all princesses in his eyes, that his world simply would be almost non-existent if she was missing. While on the other hand, the woman, the wife, is constantly giving her husband the support that he needs, the kavod that he needs, of how she's appreciative of everything that he does, whether it be making money, or the fact that he's learning Torah, or both, or he's just a very good and supportive husband. There's no a shortage of reasons of why you need to appreciate each other. And I think that's one of the main things that's lacking in most relationships, where a lot of the excitement is wasted on the initial parts of a relationship. When people are about to get married, you have the flowers and you have the presents and you have the party, and then you end up feeding a bunch of strangers that your parents and your grandparents invited for the wedding, and then life sets in, you settle in, and then little by little the relationship deteriorates. And sometimes it's not even little by little. Many times people are already asking about whether they are allowed to get a divorce within the first year, because they simply don't realize that the wife or the husband is not the problem. You are the person that's asking the question, not knowing how to be that husband, not knowing how to be that wife that you're supposed to. And many times it's because of not knowing how to be generous with words, how to be generous with compliments, how to be appreciative of the things that perhaps you take for granted. Now, if we are unappreciative with the ones that we're supposed to express the most amount of love to, needless to say, we are unappreciative, and to the point of just thinking that it's strange when I tell you that you have to start viewing the furniture in your house, specifically the bed in your house, as a holy tool. Now, the traditional mentality is so far away from this, where to look at a bed as if it's holy seems so far-fetched, so foreign to us, that you're trying to question whether the speaker is insane, delusional, Perhaps he's from a different time, but no, I'm here, I'm normal, and I promise you, I live in the same year as you do, and I came from the same place as you did. But the reality is that once you learn the words of the sages, as we're going to learn tonight, Be'ezrat Hashem, you're going to start viewing things very differently and start appreciating things very differently. And hopefully, this type of lecture will inspire you to start appreciating not just your bed, but appreciating the one that's with you in that bed, all the things that come out of that bed as a result, as literally special tools, holy tools that you are able to now sanctify Hashem's name and serve Him. Now, the Ramban has taught us that there's a auspicious time to be intimate, the time of the mikveh, time before someone travels for an extended period of time, and certainly the time of Shabbat and the holidays, the Jewish holidays. Now, the Torah scholars that really want to elevate themselves above and beyond the norm, specifically, make sure to preserve themselves only for Shabbat. With the exception of the obligations, they only are intimate during Shabbat, whereas the rest of the people out there are, doing, obviously, they're intimate throughout the week as well, which again, there's no problem. The only thing that we would add to it is that you can still sanctify that holy act by making sure to do it at a specific time, which we've discussed in the previous lectures, that is after Chatzot, after the middle of the night, which we're going to get deeper into later on in the series of why there's such a significance during this time and not 8 o'clock at night or 4 o'clock in the afternoon or perhaps even 8 o'clock in the morning breakfast. Why is it that the middle of the night is such a special time? That's something we're going to get into later on. But after letting us know that Shabbat is the foundation of creation. Shabbat is one of the critical tools that Hashem instilled into this world to keep it alive. Because as society, both Jew and Gentile, continue to sin and desecrate God's name on a regular basis, whether it be today or in previous generations, the world has to constantly find new energy in order to have life. Just like a person has to eat and drink, the world has to eat and drink, but albeit spiritually. So how do you eat and drink when the life is constantly sucked out of you by the desecration of your Creator? The one way that Hashem put into it, aside from bringing the tzaddikim, the especially righteous people, is putting a special day that the entire world stands on, which is Shabbat. And this Shabbat is, in essence, one of the energy sources of this world that gives us a new found life each and every single week. Not that it erases the sins of the past week, because sins are not just erased just because time has passed. It's not like the common saying of time heal all wounds. This is not a reality. This is just a nice statement that people would like to believe, but in reality, the time does not heal all wounds. You have certain things that if you don't know how to deal with them will permanently hurt you. Like I have this aunt who just passed away, Alea Shalom, she had several children, and her youngest son, passed away young. He had cancer, and I remember him when I was a kid in Israel, and he was a good friend of my father's. His name was Yossi, and he was a young, handsome guy, go-getter, and he got cancer when he was still very young. I believe he was still maybe in early 20s. He beat it the first time, but then when it came back, there was nothing to beat. It killed him, and he left this world. Now, his mom never got over it. And when I say she never got over it, I literally mean that. Until her dying day, I mean, she was in, I believe, the last year or so, she was practically in a coma. But until that, so long as she was functioning and living in our home, every single day for the last 35, 40 years, she would go into his room, fold his clothes, do laundry, make the bed as if he's alive, and cry. So, and I'm sure that some of you have heard horrible stories like this where some traumatizing experience that a person dealt with, whether it be death of a loved one or other types of trauma. There's no shortage of traumas out there. that literally a person simply could not get over with, could not get over it. And, now if you're going to mention, but even Yaakov Avinu was not able to get over the death of Yosef when he thought he was dead. The reason why Yaakov Avinu in his great holiness was not able to get over it was because his neshama knew that Yosef is not dead. And although Hashem programmed us to naturally get over the loss of a loved one after a year, his neshama was not able to do it because the neshama knew that he's still alive. So he simply couldn't get over it. So it's very different than the story I'm telling you about my aunt or anybody else that you know, perhaps even yourself. Now, a person has to have the right tools in order to build what he wants to build. A person has to have the right tools in order to handle the different obstacles in life. And if a person doesn't have the right tools in order to deal with the trials and tribulations of life, they simply could suffer from the same exact thing, even though it stopped being relevant for decades. Now, one of the things that we see in many marriages is that, especially the ones that have gone to a point of what seems to be no return, is that the fighting becomes the standard. The love is no longer existent. It seems like the two people hate each other, but they're simply living with each other out of convenience. It seems like there is no recovery possible out of it. But the truth is that the recovery is still possible if they wanted to recover. And when I say if they wanted to recover, I mean if they're willing to do what's necessary in order for it to recover. Many times people will go to different types of consultants and psychiatrists and all types of family therapy in order to try to fix things that you could really do for free. And the number one thing that a person can do in order to fix their relationship, regardless with who it is, whether it's their relationship with their spouse, their relationship with their children, their relationship with their rabbi, their relationship with their employees, with their boss, number one thing that you can do in order to repair relationships is to show constant appreciation without expecting anything in return. But the beautiful part is that when you start showing people constant appreciation, eventually they're going to believe that you truly appreciate them. Initially, if you've never showed enough appreciation, they're not really going to appreciate it. They're not going to believe you. If you've never complimented your wife, you've never complimented your rabbi, unless some strange thing happened, in reality, they're not going to, take it seriously. They're going to think you're just joking. They're going to think you think it's funny, and sometimes they'll even take it offensively because they'll think you're making fun of them. That in essence, you're saying the opposite of what you're really saying. So, but when a person is constantly complimenting and showing appreciation and gratitude for that person, and if you really think about it, you'll find plenty of reasons to be grateful to those people that love you and the people that you love. Because if they love you, that's already more than enough reason for you to appreciate them. If they help you in any way, shape, or form, even if it's simply making you food or even lending you a pen. If a person truly understands the depth of appreciation, they would literally appreciate a person that lent them a pen for the rest of their life. But if a person doesn't know that, doesn't understand the value of appreciation, then they'll even forget to appreciate the person that gave them a life, a marriage, children, gave them a job, gave them a literally everything and anything that they could possibly have. They'll forget it. So it's important and critical really for a person to be very generous, especially since it doesn't really cost money to be generous with words. To be generous with those that you love if you want that relationship to prosper, and needless to say, if you want that relationship to be fixed. But if you're not willing to be generous with compliments, then in so many words, you are choosing your own misery. You are choosing to drink the poison. You are choosing to live with the consequences. And unfortunately, we're not even allowed to be merciful on you. Why? Because you're not allowed to be merciful on people that are considered crazy. And a person that does not take these words to heart is certainly considered crazy. So now, with that being said, the Ramban told us that we have to appreciate the Shabbat as not only a holy day between us and God, and a day that Hashem rested, a day that we became a unique nation, if you will, that is the only nation that's allowed to observe the Shabbat is the Jewish nation. This was a special gift that Hashem gave to the Jewish people, as the Gemara in Masechet Shabbat says in the beginning of the tractate, the first chapter. But even more so, the Ramban is now taking us to the next level. He's taking us to something further. And now he's going to tell us about it's in so many words, ending this segment and starting the new segment. And really we're only going to be covering just a handful of lines. But these lines need to be dissected, reviewed, and certainly appreciated for what they are. The Ramban says, now that we have awakened you to awareness of this matter he's referring to the significance of Shabbat and intimacy on Shabbat. Now that you're aware of it, now that you're awakened by this, the awesomeness of this act during Shabbat, we shall return to what we intended to clarify. We shall say that the time of the intimate union is divided into 3 phases. The first phase is the time of the season in the term of days. This is what we just discussed in regards to Shabbat. The second is a time of union in terms of food. Yes, food has a significant impact on intimacy and what comes out of it. And the third part is the time of union in terms of the hours. The first part was already explained in this chapter. So now we are, in essence, he's giving us again that caption about the breakdown of each and every single aspect of the intimate act between a man and his wife. And he's letting us know that something that perhaps we didn't think of, that food actually has a significant impact on your intimacy. Now, if you notice, the way that we're studying this book is very different than the way people read books. Usually when people read books, they many times either skim through it, or even if they are reading it, they're reading it, but not necessarily always studying it unless something jumps out of the page for them, and to the point where it's a thought-provoking and life-changing. And generally speaking, the way that people study the books is they learn the books, they read them, is they just look at them superficially. Many times they will forget most of what they read, with the exception of a few points. One of those points is usually the name, so they can tell somebody they read such and such book. But the way that we're actually reading this book is very different, as you've noticed, like we've done our other series, is that we're actually studying the book. A very, very different way of doing it, where we're literally looking at every single line and dissecting it. Now, this may seem uncommon to people that have read other works by the Ramban, people that have read and heard about what's called the Iggeret Ramban, the letter that the Ramban wrote to his son. There is a skula that the Ramban mentions at the end of that letter to his son, which is that if you read this letter each day, your prayers will come true. And many people simply assumed that he's not only talking to his son, he's also talking to you. So if you read the Iggeret Ramban every single day, your blessings will be answered. And again, this may very well be true, but at the same token, you have to realize, if you watch the series of Iggeret Ramban that we made a few years ago, is that it's not just about reading the letter, but also following what it says. But more so than anything else, if you talk to Torah scholars, then you'll find that any time that they learn Gemara, and they're at a level where they're reading different mefarshim, different commentators, it's very often people ask, what does the Ramban say about this? And not only what does he say about this particular line in the Gemara, but how does he say it? Where his words are read, analyzed with a microscope. So much so that even the way that he spells the words is analyzed by certain chachamim, similar to how they study other rishonim, like the Rambam, where the language of the sages of the about 800 years ago is not just language where you can learn the wisdom, but even the way that they spoke and how they spoke is analyzed. But many times people believe that this is how you study their commentary on the Tanakh, on the Chumash, on the Gemara. But when you read some of their letters, their Musar writings, many times people read it superficially, almost like they read other books. And that's a mistake, because as Rabbi Ephraim has taught me, this hand wrote this commentary and also this letter. Meaning the very same Ramban that you are dissecting and analyzing every single letter to the T in his commentary on the Chumash or in the Gemara, that very same hand of the Ramban wrote this letter. And especially the fact that he called this particular letter Iggeret HaKodesh, nonetheless, the letter of holiness. So anyone that has read Parashat Kedoshim in the Torah, or has watched our different lectures about that parasha, knows that Kedoshim, to be holy, is one of the obligations that Hashem has on the Jewish people. You be holy because I am holy. And you will never find holiness in a place of immorality. But in fact, you will always find holiness in a place where there are preservation, where there are, in essence, fences in order to restrict how people express themselves physically. So this Iggeret HaKodesh that talks about the highest level of intimacy is one that needs to be analyzed with a microscope practically in order to understand the beauty of the language of the Ramban, why he said what he said, when he said it, and really how he said it. And here we see that the Ramban is telling us that food is something that is an entire phase in the act of union, a part that a person has to review, just like the first and the third phase, where anytime a person aspires to attain this holiness, they have to, first and foremost, review themselves, review their act. Don't review your husband or your wife or your neighbor or your neighborhood, because that's obviously not your job. Your job is not to analyze your entire community and say that they're all wicked or they're all righteous. That's not going to do anything for you. Many times people send me messages complaining about their community, complaining about their rabbi, complaining about the yeshivot, but rarely do they ever complain about themselves. Rarely do they ever say, I'm not doing enough, I need to do more, and this is my plan. It's very easy to complain about others, and the reality is that the first line of rebuke should be to the person you see when you look in the mirror. Now, the Ramban is telling us that this act of intimacy, this holy union, has three phases. One being the specific season, meaning the Shabbat, but the second part being the union in terms of food. So a person has to now look at how food affects them. How food affects them, and we saw from the Gemara in Masechet Bava Kama, in page 82, how Ezra Sofer enacted 10 takanot. One of them was a takana to have Am Yisrael eat cooked onion on Friday night, because it increases the quantity of the zera, of the seed. So we see that the teachings about the seed of a man, the acts of intimacy, but specifically the seed, everything around it, before, during, after, all of it, is enormous. There's a endless amount of teachings about this part of the body. You know, whether it's starting the Torah, where you're reading about what happened between Adam and Chava, how he knew his wife, or it's a generation of Noach that wasted seed and thereby lost their right to live, and Hashem annihilated the entire generation, with the exception of Noach and his family, or it's Avraham Avinu, and having that special covenant that is as relevant today as it was back then, which is the Brit Milah, cutting the foreskin. We see that Hashem is very particular about how we treat our Brit. And needless to say, how we treat the seed that comes out of that Brit. Now, the Ramban is telling us that food has an enormous impact on that very seed. And from there, one of the first things that a person can really realize is how much effort, how much toil, how much significance is put into the study of the seed of the seed of the man, where you have literally volumes and volumes of Torah discussing the different aspects of seed, wasted, preserved, ones that are damaged, deformed, and so on. And you see from here that the sages spared no ink when it came to the power of the seed, because if a person thinks about it, that seed was given the power to not only determine whether there's going to be a child or not, but rather that seed is going to determine the fortune of generations. Now, what is this like? Years ago, there was one of the great sages of the generation, of all generations, named the Chafetz Chaim, of Israel Meir, Miladin. Now, Rabbi Israel Meir, the Chafetz Chaim, alav shalom, toiled over the Torah day and night, but did not waste a minute when there was an opportunity to do Kiruv and to help people do tshuva and to get closer to Hashem. He exerted every single effort, even at the age of 100 years old. Now, although some bios will tell you that he passed away at the age of 94 years old, it's well known that the Chafetz Chaim hid 10 years of his life as a defense against Ayin Hara, and really died at the age of 104 years old. But regardless of that, the Chafetz Chaim, still at a very, very old age, told his students to please take him from house to house so he can inspire people to do tshuva. So he can inspire people to abandon their sins. When one of the students asked the Rav, why? Why do you try so hard? Okay, we know you love the Torah, you learn Torah, but you've already done a lot. You've brought the Mishnah Brura, you've brought the Chafetz Chaim, you've brought light to the world, you've brought the yeshivot, you've brought so much to the world. The students of the Chafetz Chaim were the Gedolei Hador. So, you did enough. Why? You're already older. Why not just, focus on learning Torah, relaxing? But why now at this age do you need to exert your last bit of energy knocking door to door and trying to convince different families to do tshuva? Why? The Chafetz Chaim answered with all seriousness, as if he was living what he was saying. And he said, years ago, there was a young boy that didn't grow up with a father, only grew up with his mother. And since she was raising him by herself, this woman could not really afford to pay for the yeshiva education, and she was not getting any help from the community and was forced to take her son out of the yeshiva. Once that boy left the yeshiva and went to the traditional public schools, he started becoming influenced by different people from that part of the world, from that part of society. And little by little, this very ambitious kid grew his own opinion, his own mindset, his own philosophy, into becoming something that destroyed millions of lives and is still destroying lives until this day. His name was Leon Trotsky. Leon Trotsky could have been saved, he said, if somebody would have knocked on his mother's door and convinced her to bring our boy back to yeshiva, found a solution for her to bring that boy back to yeshiva. But because nobody did, millions of people, Jews and Gentiles included, were murdered in cold blood from the communism that he brought into the world, or brought it into a higher level than it already was. So the Chafetz Chaim is telling us that that particular seed that came from the father of Trotsky didn't just impact Trotsky, but it impacted the life of the Chafetz Chaim. It impacted the lives of millions and millions of people that lost their lives due to Trotsky's evil acts. Impacted millions and millions of lives of people that perhaps didn't die physically, but died spiritually due to the teachings and leaderships of Trotsky. And impacted millions and millions of lives until this day of people that have similar mentalities, ambitions, and thereby use the teachings of Trotsky and the philosophy of Trotsky until this day. That one single seed impacted an endless amount of people. And if we simply understood that our seed could have no less of an impact, if not more of an impact, into the world, certainly we would not want to waste it. Certainly we would appreciate it much more than we do. And in fact, we'd put a lot more thought into it in order to make sure that we're using it the way it's supposed to. But many times people jump to a conclusion too early. This is too much. This is too extreme. Or they start mocking things because they think that they're already religious enough. And anytime a person takes Hashem's words, takes the sage's words, and discounts them, they can be sure that disaster is sure to follow. Now, if you notice some of the lives of the great sages from previous generations, you'll see that this is one thing they never did. They never discounted anything. Everything was given the precise amount of attention that it needed, even though it looked strange to some people that watched it, at least at the time. One of the great stories that I read with my children is about Rav Shmuel Vosner and how this Torah giant paid attention to the most microscopic details that the average person, even if he learned Torah, wouldn't even think of. Well, one time there was a woman came to the Bet Midrash where Rav Vosner was, or came to his house where he was studying with his Avrechim. And she, as soon as she saw the Gabbai, she was frantic. She said, I have to speak to the Rav immediately. Of course, you know, when a woman comes and it sounds like this, a religious woman covers her hair, you know, very serious demeanor, you go to the Rav and ask him, and the Rav said, sure, let her in. And this woman came to Rav Vosner and told him, Kvod Rav, I just want to tell you that I'm very careful with my Pesach dishes versus the rest of the year. So much so that I have 2 different cabinets. One cabinet is for my Pesach dishes, pots and pans, all the things that are relevant to Pesach, and one cabinet is for the rest of the year. And in fact, just to make sure that there's no errors, each cabinet is locked with a key. Now, although both keys are exactly the same, I never forget which key is which and mistake one key for the other. But something awful happened, Kvod Rav. This morning, something terrible happened. One of my children was playing around in the kitchen and found the key and used the Pesach key to open the cabinets of the non-kosher dishes and the regular key to open the cabinets of the Pesach dishes. Now, does that mean that all of my dishes are not kosher for Pesach? I have to get new ones? Now, the Avrechim that were there, they found this question so silly, they couldn't help but smile. Like, how would you opening a closet make the dishes not kosher? Needless to say, not kosher for Pesach. Nothing happened. You just open a cabinet with the key. But then they're shocked to see that the Rav Shmuel Vosnel, one of the Gedolei Adol, take this question as seriously as life and death, and says to the lady, "That's a very big she'elah. I have to check." And he starts grabbing different books. And he opens the books, goes through the pages, reads a few lines, nods, then gets another book, reads a few lines, nods. And after several minutes of doing this, he looks up at the woman and says, "Baruch Hashem, I've confirmed that all of your dishes are perfectly fine for Pesach and for the rest of the year. Nothing has changed. You're okay." The woman is relieved, happy, and she quickly leaves. Now, of course, as soon as she leaves, the students ask the Rav, "What just happened here? What did you even look at in the books? And why did you spend so much effort to answer this question that's really a non-question?" And Rav Vosnel taught these students something that all of us need to learn from. And he says to them, this woman clearly has real Yirat Shamayim. She really has fear of heaven and a high level of it. So much so that she doesn't know when this stringency is a real stringency or something that was made up. But if I discredited her, if I frowned upon it, if I laughed at it, then she would be so discouraged that who knows what real stringencies she would start mocking and abandoning. And therefore I had to take that stringency as seriously as a real stringency and make sure that she knows everything is okay. From there we see how careful the sages were in communicating about even things that to the average person doesn't make any sense. And if a person watches any of these lectures or reads any type of Torah and discounts it, thinks of it as this is not a big deal, this is impossible, all types of empty speech, they can be sure that the road ahead is not going to be a smooth road because you've taken the Torah one step lower. Now, the Ramban is telling us here that here we have an enormous amount of energy and effort invested into the study of the seed. One of the books of philosophy by one of the sages of a few hundred years ago, a sefer called Sefer Malkiel. This was written by Rav Malkiel Chizkiah ben Avraham, who was also quoted by the Shla HaKadosh, who lived about 400 years ago. And this Sefer Malkiel mentions the intelligent soul and how it has the power to create other souls. And he says that this seed is not something that just comes from nowhere. Rather, this is actually comes from this special part of the soul, this intelligent soul, where the seed and a desire, an unlimited power, was instilled into this seed, where the souls of the future will be determined. So this special part of the soul that rests in the brain is a segment of that not only produces the spiritual aspects, but also the physical aspects of the seed. There's a certain part of the brain that's involved in production of seed. But even more than that, here the Sefer Malkiel is telling us that the desire and also the outcome of what could come out of this is all coming from that special part of the soul. Now the Gemara in Masechet Sotah, in page 4a, is discussing the whole issue of a sotah, a wayward woman, a woman that is suspected of cheating on her husband. This is something that comes from the Parashat Naso in a Chumash. A woman that secludes herself with a man that's not her husband, and after being warned by her husband not to do this again, she does it again anyway, and thereby earning the suspicion of her husband that she may have actually cheated on him and committed adultery. And in those days, when the Sanhedrin was the power, the legal power of the Jewish people, if someone was convicted of committing adultery, they get a death penalty, both them and their co-conspirator. But how do you confirm such a thing without cameras or anything like that? After the woman was warned by her husband not to seclude herself with another man, and she does it anyway, and there are two witnesses to her seclusion, the husband then takes her to the Kohen HaGadol in the Bet HaMikdash. And once they get to the Bet HaMikdash, the Kohen tries to convince this woman to admit that she committed adultery, because he doesn't want her to deny it when she really did it and then end up drinking the bitter waters, which will kill her. So the process of trying to convince her is one of the things that is mentioned in the entire tractate of Sotah, where he talks to her, tries to pressure her, tries to tire her out by making her walk around the Bet HaMikdash. It's an entire process, very embarrassing process. But if she denies it throughout the whole process, eventually she drinks the water, a water that was not just any water, a water that is a holy water that they also put the name of Hashem that was written on a cloth, and then dipped into the water where the ink, along with a specific verse, dipped into the water where the ink went into the water. Then she drinks this water, and if she's guilty, on the spot, she blows up and dies. But if she's innocent, then she gets a blessing from the Kohen HaGadol for whatever she wants. If she didn't have children until now because she's not able to do it, she will now have as many children as she wants, in so many words. If her children are beautiful, any child she has from now on will become, if her children are ugly, any child she has now will become beautiful. If they have money issues, they won't have money issues. Like literally they get miraculous blessings. But if she's guilty, she dies. This, by the way, as a side note, is why Hannah went to the Bet HaMikdash and was crying hysterical when Eliah Cohen thought she was drunk, when she was nodding and moving her lips but not saying anything, and he thought that she was drunk. He didn't realize that she was praying. And Hannah went there because she told Hashem that if you don't give me a blessing, you don't give me a son, I'm going to put myself in a situation where it's going to look like I'm a sotah. It's going to look like I'm a wayward woman that cheated on my husband, which will force my husband to take me to the Kohen HaGadol. And after the Kohen HaGadol fails at convincing me to admit something I didn't even do, and he gets me to drink the waters, then I'll get the blessing, and the blessing, then I'll have a son anyway. So in so many words, she's like arguing with Hashem, if you will. But to have a blessing, to have a son that she's dedicating to Hashem. But this is why she went to the Bet HaMikdash. Anyway, the wayward woman is put into this process. If she drinks and she's guilty, she dies on the spot. There was actually a story that mentioned that one woman had a twin sister. They thought that they could beat the system. They thought that perhaps it's the water that kills, not God that kills. So they switched. Since they were identical twins, even the husband couldn't tell the difference between the two of them. And the sister, who wasn't married to the husband, who didn't cheat, went and drank the water. And nothing happened. So she thought, oh, I saved my sister. Even though my sister is a zonah and she cheated on her husband, still, I saved my sister. My sister's more important to me than her husband is. But when she came back to her house, she found her sister blew up into pieces in her house. It's not the water that kills. It's not the snake that kills. It's God that kills. It's sin that kills. Now, this whole process of the sotah is analyzed by the sages to the smallest and most minute details. And the Gemara in Masechet Sotah, page 4a, asks a question that's relevant to us, where it says, "V'kama shiur stira." How long is the duration of seclusion? Meaning, how long must the woman be secluded with a man that's not her husband in order to be rendered a sotah? In order for her to say, okay, this is it, you crossed the line, now you have to go to the Kohen. How long? And then the sages, the different Tanaim, go into the details and they say, well, in so many words, the time is the time that it takes for tum'ah, for defilement to occur. Which is the time that it takes, same type of time that it takes for the actual act, for cohabitation to take place. Which means that it takes for the beginning of cohabitation. And how much time is this? The amount of time that it takes to circle a palm tree. You know, in those days, they would circle the palm tree, put a rope around it for different reasons. So they figured that the amount of time that it takes to put a rope around a palm tree, that's how long the time of the beginning of intimacy should take place. Now, this is not the entire act, meaning it's the one of the Chachamim, the Chidushei Agriz, says that this does not include the seducement of the woman. It doesn't include removing all the clothes. It doesn't include all that stuff. It's just, in essence, the beginning of cohabitation, the beginning of intimacy. And they start going into the details that different sages say how much time it takes. The initial opinion is that it takes as long as it takes to circle a tree, a palm tree. Rabbi Eliezer says it takes the same amount of time as it does to mix a cup. Where in those days they had the wine was very thick and had to be diluted. So the process with water. So the process of diluting the wine, took a few seconds. So he says that as long as it takes to dilute a cup of wine, that's how long it takes to the beginning of cohabitation is. Rabbi Yeshua says the amount of time that it takes to drink that cup, which is a specific quantity called revi'it. Ben Azai says it's the amount of time that it takes to roast an egg. Rabbi Akiva says it's the amount of time it takes to swallow the egg. Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera says the time that it takes to swallow 3 eggs successively. Rabbi Elazar ben Yirmiyah says the time that it takes to a weaver to tie a string. In those days their beds weren't like today with mattresses and comforters and stuff like that. The way that they would make beds is they would tie a rope specific way, and that would become their bed. So the reason why he specifically mentions a weaver is because a weaver ties the bed much faster. In essence, trying to tell you that this doesn't take very long, but it's a specific amount of time. Chanin ben Pinchas says the time that it takes a woman to extend her hand into her mouth and remove a splinter that was stuck between her teeth. In those days, instead of the toothpicks, they would use splinters to remove stuff from their mouth. And the reason why he mentions the time it takes a woman to do that is because a woman was a lot more particular about it and quicker to do it. Again, emphasizing that it's not much time. Seconds, a few minutes, but not very much time. That's in essence the common opinion among all the sages here. But they each use a different example of how long with it. It's to eat an egg, cook an egg, eat 3 eggs, tie, all these strange things that again probably sound foreign to you as well. And Plemo says the time it takes a woman to extend her hand into a basket and remove a loaf of bread. And even though there's no solid biblical proof for this particular one, there's an allusion to it in the verse in Proverbs chapter 6 verse 26, where Shlomo HaMelech says, Ki be'ad isha zona ad kikar lechem. Because in the account of a harlot, a zonah, to the extent of a loaf of bread. So from there we learn a couple of things before we go further, just to understand. We see that all of these other proofs are the calculations of those particular sages, as the Gemara in 4b says. Where did they get all these numbers? Where did they get all these calculations? Each one of them has the understanding based on their own acts with their own wives. How long is that first stage, that first beginning stage of cohabitation? How long it takes? Rabbi Akiva says that, Rabbi Elazar says this, everyone from their own particular experience. There's a question that's brought up, or how does one of the sages that was a student of Rabbi Akiva, Ben Azai was his name, how does he even give an opinion? He wasn't married. He wasn't married, so how does he even know this? So the Gemara answers, it's also in 4b. The Gemara says, no, either if you're of the opinion, like the Gemara says at a different tractate, in Masechet Ketubot, page 63a, that he actually was married for a short period of time to Rabbi Akiva's daughter, and then he left her, and he stayed unmarried and didn't want to get married in the first place because he was addicted to the Torah. And he knew he would not be a good husband. We said that what else can I do? My soul craves the Torah, and the world can be preserved by other people. So Ben Azai was a specially unique person, where the Gemara says don't ever try to repeat what he did. He literally spent every waking hour learning Torah to the point where he couldn't even be a husband. So where did he learn it from? So some say, no, he was married. So from that short period of time that he was married to Rabbi Akiva's daughter, that's where he learned the calculation. And some say, even if he wasn't married, then he had such a high level of fear of heaven that Hashem says, Sod Hashem le'yerav, in Tehillim. The secrets of Hashem are revealed to those that fear Him. This is in Psalm 25, verse 14. So, in so many words, he got it from God. God gave him a special deal. Here you go, here's some secrets. So, each one of the sages used their own experience to learn this. But then we have one sage says, well, even as though this is not in there's no biblical proof to it, there is a verse that says something that testifies to it in Proverbs. So one of the other things that we learn from here in regards to the holiness of the sages is that if it was not listed in the Torah, shown clearly in the Torah, in order, the only other way for it to be something is if they actually had personal experience with it. But if it doesn't exist in the Torah, and they don't have any proof from their own personal lives, it simply doesn't exist. Now, of course, everything is in the Torah. But many times, you'll see the sages also mention specific personal experience with certain things. Now, the Gemara asks, why do I need all these different times? Why don't you just tell me the first opinion, which is the time it takes to wrap the rope around the tree? Why do I need the egg, the 3 eggs, the cook the egg, eat the egg, the loaf of bread? What do I need all of this for? And the Gemara says, if it was taught to you where just one opinion, you'd have a misunderstanding. What's the misunderstanding? All of them were necessary because when you ask, how long does it take for the defilement to occur? If I would have just given you that one opinion, you would have assumed that I'm also including the time it takes to become defiled and her seduction. But no, these are two separate things. And further, if I would have mentioned only one of them, you would have thought that this also includes the actual act itself to be completed. And it doesn't. So from here we learn that, the Gemara gives multiple examples of this specific thing, how long it takes. Why do we go over this? Why do we care? Because from there we learn, at least, how careful the sages were with their language and what usage of words they have. 2, how nothing comes out of thin air. There's no I think. There's either personal example, something that you've seen with your own eyes, or Torah. Otherwise, it simply doesn't exist. But the third thing is, how much effort was invested into every single aspect of unity between a man and a woman, whether it was a man and his wife, or an adulterous relationship, but literally every aspect was analyzed to the point of how much time each step is supposed to take. What can you compare it to? How can you understand it? Is it just your own unique experience, or is it general knowledge? But even more than anything else, the Gemara says, it's not that there were 7 different experiences and therefore you got 7 different examples. No. Is that there is 7 different types of connections between a man and a woman, of how they unite, what causes them to become aroused, 7 different types of things that cause arousal, and therefore you got 7 different types of examples. This type of arousal takes as long as, to cook an egg. That type of arousal takes to eat 3 eggs. That type, 1 egg. That type, bread. Meaning that it's not just random things, I like eggs, I like bread, I like ropes. No. Every single thing is representing something else. So why not just say that? Because that's not how the Chachamim speak. Just like Hashem himself doesn't speak in such a clear fashion when it comes to this particular issue, so much so that Hashem himself uses euphemisms to represent different body parts or different acts. For example, in the part of the Torah where Hashem says promiscuity is forbidden for a man and a woman, Hashem says a euphemism, an opposite, where he says a kedesha or a kadosh is not allowed. A kedesha, if you translate it literally, means a holy woman. A kadosh means a holy man. You have an entire parasha in the Torah and multiple others that tells us that the obligation of Am Yisrael is to be holy. But here it says we're not allowed to be holy. So obviously the sages say, but look at what's said before it. Look at what's said after it. It's all talking about immorality. So this is, the type of immorality which is something that's on a regular basis, promiscuity. People having girlfriends, boyfriends, and things of that nature. That's forbidden. But Hashem uses that particular language because the holy language is exactly what it is. It's a holy language. There isn't even a word in the holy language for the male member. It's not like English where there's 50 different words for the male member that some people made up, some comes from Latin. No. There is no word in the holy language for the male member. They call it erva, but they also call the female part erva. But erva, what does erva mean? Erva means nakedness. So from there the sages learned that since Hashem himself uses clean language, which you'll get the meaning of, you'll understand it, so therefore it's not necessary to use these words, they themselves also don't use these words when it's not necessary. Now, even when talking about it, the sages are very careful, even though it is a very common topic, and one of the reasons why it's not recommended and really frowned upon for women, especially in our generation, to learn Gemara, is because these particular issues are mentioned almost in every tractate in the Gemara at some point or another. And it's not healthy for a woman spiritually to look into this type of stuff on a regular basis, especially when it's not pertaining to her life and her body. But the point is that we see here that the sages used a specific holy language that told us how every single aspect of unity, whether it's the forbidden way or in a way that's holy, how each and every step was analyzed. Why? Why do we need to analyze every single part? Why do we need to put so much effort, so much Torah study time into understanding the magnitude of this act? The sages showed us their holiness where they want us to know that just like in the world of genetics, the science of genetics, where they'll take a certain animal, let's call it a bull, and they want this bull because it has good genes, it's strong, it's fast, it has good meat, whatever it is. They want this bull to reproduce. Now, that bull is going to reproduce a certain amount of time, but not all of its seed will produce the same thing. So the geneticist will analyze the different parts of that bull and take the best parts that they want and try to reproduce them in a different cow. So much so that if they found a specific bull with a certain type of meat that they want, with a certain percentage of fat, certain versus muscle, certain type, quality, and so on, they will literally go into it, the smallest, most minute details, in order to take this and reproduce it, in order to make better quality meat. And anyone that is familiar somewhat with this type of science knows that the smallest, most microcosmic details are analyzed in order to ensure that the results are going to be worth the effort. Because if you have one small dot missing, the whole research could be worth millions of dollars, goes into the garbage. Years ago, Rav Nissim again said a story where he said that there was a guy that bought himself a plant in Israel. And he went on the bus and he's happy about his little plant. Plant is brand new. And he's happy about this plant. Why? Because he's hoping that once he plants this plant, it's going to grow after several years and produce his favorite fruit. Now, as he's sitting in the bus, the guy next to him looks and nods. He says to him, "Why are you nodding?" He says, "Because the fruits are going to be bitter." He says, "Excuse me?" So the guy says to him, "Your tree, the little plant that you got, the fruits, they're going to be bitter. They're not going to be sweet like you probably want." So the guy looks at him and goes, How do you even know? The plant didn't even grow. It's still little. It's still a baby plant. Why being so negative? Why so negative? Why are you hating on my plant?" So the guy looks at him and goes, No, you're not understanding. I'm not hating on the plant. I'm telling you a reality. That plant will grow into a tree and produce bitter fruits. And there's nothing you can do about it. So the frustrated Israeli looks at him and says, "How do you know what kind of fruits are going to come out and how they're going to taste just by looking at my plant? Are you jealous?" And the guy laughs and says, No, I'm not jealous. I'm an agriculturist. This is what I've been doing for the last 40 years, analyzing different plants. And your plant has a specific black mark right near the bottom. And every single one of them that we've analyzed that had bitter fruits had exactly that mark on it. And therefore I know the fruits that will come out of that plant are going to be bitter. Now, how could a small little black dot cause so much damage? You could ask that question until you blue in the face. And unless you want to become an agriculturist or a geneticist or a chemist or a biologist, you could just simply save yourself the time and simply believe it, because it's a reality. But you could even ask whoever cooks in your house if they simply take this little white powder and put a little bit too much or a little bit too little into the next dish that they cook for the household, what happens? A little bit too much of that salt, a little too little of that salt, a little too much of that sugar, a little too little of that sugar. And the entire dish changes as if it's a completely different dish. Now, although in food you can change that by adding a little, taking off a little, watering it down, you can't do that with living things like trees, fruits, and needless to say with humans. Once it's done, it's done. There was another guy that was looking for a tree, looking for fruits, looking for different things to enjoy them. And he found a guy that was willing to sell him the seeds. And he wanted the seeds more than anything else. But the guy wanted a huge amount of money for the seed. Call it $40 a seed. He said, "You crazy, $40 for one seed?" He said, "Listen, sir, this is what it costs. It's a good seed. You can have endless amount of fruits that you could pretty much reproduce. You never have to buy seeds again." And the guy just simply couldn't bring himself to do it. He says, "You want to take 20? He says, "No, we're not going to take 20. That's $40 a good price." So they don't get to an agreement. He leaves the place, but as soon as he comes out, some Arab walks up to him and says, "Well, what's wrong with you?" He says, "No, these guys are crazy. They want $40 a seed." He says, "What seed do you want?" He says, "I want such and such seed." He goes, "I can get it for you. How much you want to pay?" He says, $20. He goes, "You got it. $20 is good." "Great, come with me." He goes with the Arab. A few minutes later, the Arab gives him some seeds, look exactly the same. Here you go, $20. He's as happy as he gets. He thinks he just got the best deal in the world. Waters the seed, takes care of it. Little by little, it grows. But as it grows, he starts seeing this thing grow in deformed ways. The opposite of what nature is supposed to do. He comes back to the Arab and goes, "What'd you sell me here? What is this thing? Why does it grow this way?" He Goes, I don't know, listen, this is the seed. But this is what you sold me, this is garbage, and I can't use this. He said, there's no refunds. She says, but why does it do it? Why? Just at least explain to me. He goes, oh no, these seeds, they have this black dot on them. So they tend to do it. Oh, you couldn't tell me that before? Then you wouldn't buy. So the reality is that this type of information is relevant to every part of life, but the most pertinent part of it is in your part of your intimate life. Because the more a person invests into learning about Kedusha, holiness, the more they are now going to make themselves capable of attaining holiness. Now, the Gemara in Yerushalmi takes us on a different path. In Masechet Moed Katan. Masechet Moed Katan, in the third chapter, the fifth halacha. Here it talks about the part of Shiva. When somebody dies, then one of the things that the immediate family member needs to do is to overturn the bed. Today, since we have different beds, as I explained before, back then their beds were rope tied, so they would simply overturn the bed. Today, you take off the mattress, put it on the floor. But the Gemara asks, why do you even do this? What's the significance of overturning the bed? What does that have to do with dead people? What does that have to do with, the guy that's alive that's mourning? Why? So the Gemara says, from where does the overturning of the beds, where does it come from? What is this? That's the question. Rabbi Crispy says, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, that this is one of the things that a person needs to do, not to sit on the ground, but towards the ground. And Bar Kapara elaborates that this whole overturning of the bed is after the expression overturn the agent. And Rabbi Yonah and Rabbi Yosef both say, in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, that why does one sleep on an overturned coach? So that he would wake up at night and realize that he's a mourner. So far, if you haven't learned Gemara, this is all cryptic language. Doesn't mean anything to you. First, they're telling you, okay, so don't sit on the floor. Fine. Sit towards the floor. So it shows you that, okay, so this bed is overturned, so you're, in essence, it's not a comfortable, you're closer to the floor, it's like a very low chair. Fine. Just don't sit on the floor. Okay. But then it tells you, overturn the agent. It's calling the bed an agent. Why is a bed an agent? Then lastly, it says, why sleep on this overturned coach? Why even do this? So if he wakes up in the middle of the night, he realizes that he's a mourner. Now we're going to go and dissect this Gemara, Bezrat Hashem, to see what it means. So the question is, why overturn the bed as part of mourning? Simple answer is, because the bed is a symbolic agent. The Korban HaEdah says that the bed is an agent of mankind due to the intimacy that takes place on it. Meaning this bed, that's where intimacy takes place. So this bed is the agent that mankind is made from. This is where it takes place. Hence the reason why the act between a man and his wife in Hebrew, in the holy language, is called tashmish amita. Tashmish amita literally means usage of the bed. But it's referring to, tashmish is referring to intimacy. Again, that clean, holy language is never going to say, like people say the other words that are out there. In English, you ask the average 15-year-old, how long does anything take and what does it do? He can tell you a lot more information that he should not even know. But here the holy sages use specific words, not because they lack knowledge, the opposite, but rather because they have an understanding of how important it is to use the right words and keep a clean language. So this tashmish amita is called as such, not only as a euphemism to use the holy language and use cleanliness in the language, because a person that defiles their mouth also defiles their breed. Anytime you see somebody wasting seed, you can be sure that this person also has a foul mouth, and the same thing vice versa. If they have a foul mouth, for sure they waste seed. The two go together. Now, the sages are teaching us multiple things. The second thing they're teaching us, by using this word tashmish amita, is that the Torah scholars, as we said last week, they use the bed, but not like the regular people. They use the bed specifically for intimacy, because their regular sleeping is usually they're sleeping on their books, studying throughout the night until they pass out. They don't fall asleep in regular beds, because they're learning all night. But when the bed is used for a specific purpose, for what? For what it's meant for, the agent for mankind to produce children, to be intimate, for the mitzvah of ona'ah between a man and his wife. Second, this tashmish amita, this bed, is a reminder to even the people that are stringent with the teachings that you're supposed to mourn so long as we don't have a Bet HaMikdash, and thereby sleep on the floor, don't sleep in a bed. It's a reminder to them that not to sleep, not to do the tashmish, not to do the intimacy on the floor. That it's forbidden to be intimate on the floor. That even if somebody sleeps on the floor, he still is not allowed to be intimate on the floor. The sages forbid it. One of the reasons is because the floor is typically cold, and that can cool the seed of the man, which can produce deformed children. Shem Yishmo. So even if somebody is a very stringent person and is mourning for the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash and sleeps on the floor, the Gemara said overturning the beds is not referring to sitting on the ground, but rather towards the ground, where the tashmish itself has to be done above the ground, has to be done on the bed. And the risk of not following that literally is a risk of all of what we said earlier, which is the huge potential outcomes of what happens from these children. A person could be looking forward to having a child their whole life, and if they miss on this one particular detail and they simply just lose their mind and decide that they want to not listen to the sages or not even know what the sages say and just be on the floor, and then they have Hashem Yishmael, they have a deformed child come out of it, that's something that they have to live with for many, many years, if not their entire life. So it's that small bit of information that carries an endless amount of weight. Now, of course, I know people are going to try to pretty much hang me over this. What do you mean? How could this cause this? Because they're trying to use their little, rational 2023 heads. But again, when we're talking about Torah, it doesn't make a difference whether it makes sense to you or it doesn't make sense to you. It's true regardless. Now, the other part that this is teaching us about this bed is that this bed is the agent, this bed is the agent for mankind, and thereby this bed is supposed to be viewed as a holy tool to bring special souls to the world, and not just a place to sleep, not just a place to be like an animal, but rather this is the agent that Hashem sent me. Queen size, king size, single size, twin size, whatever size. Good mattress, bad mattress, fat mattress, small mattress, doesn't make a difference. This is the agent. When I see this bed, I think about, okay, this is something that I could use at a certain time during the month in serving Hashem. How? I can use this to potentially bring a special soul that will bring light to the world, light of Torah. A special soul that can serve Hashem day and night. A special soul that can encourage other people to serve Hashem. Needless to say, I could also use it to sleep. It's not forbidden to sleep there. And sleep, get energy so I can study better, I can serve Hashem better. There's nothing wrong with that. But the key is to understand that this is not just another piece of furniture that just sits there, that has special looks, that I spent thousands of dollars on. No. We're not a commercial on television telling you that our mattress is the best mattress in the world and their mattress sucks. No. This is a tool to serve Hashem. Either serving Hashem by having the opportunity to rest and thereby be able to serve Him even better tomorrow, or a tool that I could serve Hashem by yearning for Him to give me another special soul that could serve Him, or fulfilling the mitzvah that a man is obligated to his wife, the mitzvah of ona'ah, even if it doesn't produce a baby, even if it cannot produce a baby, it's still a mitzvah in itself that the man is obligated to do. And in so many words, when a person starts looking at this bed as a tool to serve Hashem, they start realizing, wait a minute, am I supposed to also do that with everything else? And the answer is yes. Because the sages tell us that at the end of a person's time and when he goes up to Shamayim, his walls will testify against him. The walls of his house will testify against him and let Hashem know how he used them. Did he use these things that are between these walls, these furniture, these chairs, the computer, the phone, the whatever you have in your house, did you use it to serve Hashem or did you use it against Hashem? Because Hashem is the one that gave you that phone. Hashem is the one that gave you the computer. Hashem is the one that gave you the couch, the chair, the food, the refrigerator. Did you cook kosher food or non-kosher food? Did you have guests that were just friends that simply had nothing better to do, or there were people that actually needed to be guests? Did you have peace in your home, or did you just show off your home as if you have peace? Were you like one of those TV shows that shows off how much wealth you have, but in reality the only thing you have is money, and therefore it makes you the most poorest person on planet Earth? How did you serve Hashem with this money that He gave you? How did you serve Hashem with that couch? How did you serve Hashem with that chair? Did you serve Hashem at all? And those walls will testify against the person. But more than anything else, that bed is not just testifying against its owner, but that bed is either an agent that was put to work and leaves an entire history in the makings behind, or not. If a person is more inclined to adultery, promiscuity, pornography, and Netflix, then more likely than not, that bed only acquired more and more tum'ah, no different than the bed of a zonah. Which brings us to the next point. If a person used this bed as a holy tool to bring special souls to the world, now they can understand why we have this mitzvah of turning the bed. Because now that a person passed away, that means that there is no more souls being created by that person. So therefore, since the bed is symbolic of the agent of the reproduction of mankind, now that one of the people is no longer in the world and there's no reproduction by them, we kick out the agent. We kick out the agent for a period of time as symbolic for that person no longer being here. Not only are there no more souls being produced, but the soul was taken away. Now, the worst thing that a person can do is take this stuff lightly, mock it, think it's ridiculous, and that it doesn't impact them. All you have to do is look at the current generation and how many mentally deformed children there are in the world, either a creation of their parents or their teachers or both. You have young kids who do not even know the basic alphabet, but yet they decide that they're not a boy, even though they were born with all the proper chromosomes to say that they are a boy. You have women thinking that the way for them to succeed in life is by simply selling their body as if they're a piece of steak. Regardless of what age, regardless of what person, regardless of where and how. Promiscuity is running rampant to the point where it's become admired. A woman's promiscuity and immorality is highlighted on televisions, on movies, so much so that it's become the acceptable behavior. And if you're not like this, you're viewed as prude and frowned upon. Instead of emulating the kings and the princes and the queens of yesteryear, at least the looks of them, people are emulating their servants and their prostitutes. People admire such behavior. If you look at all of history, you'll see that this is the opposite of how everything has been. You have people today that think it's perfectly fine to be multiple people, even though they don't have a disorder of bipolar disorder or multiple personality disorder. They simply want to behave one way with one person and behave a different way with a different person and behave a completely different way with a different person. People have no problem with LGBT becoming something you teach to children. Teach in schools. They have no problem teaching pornography in schools, where after the parents come and cry out to the Board of Education, not by cursing or screaming, by simply reading the textbooks, reading the books that's being provided to their kids. And then they're being silent, saying, no, okay, we get the point. What do you mean you get the point? You're the one that gave this book. You're the one that authorized these books for my 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old child, 5-year-old child to read. And this book that you're giving them in school is talking about things that you're not even allowed to think, needless to say, you're not allowed to watch, and you shouldn't. You're telling them about the acts between a man and a woman, a man, and all types of other filth. Why is this part of the curriculum? And guess what? It's not just the fault of the teachers. It's certainly also the fault of the parents, because a parent that leaves their kids in such a place is as much at fault as the teachers are. But we have an entire generation full of this. We have a generation of children that decide that as soon as they're frustrated, they're allowed to kill people and shoot up people in the mall, in schools, and stores. Never in history has such a thing happened where somebody's frustrated for whatever reason or another and they decide to take a bunch of guns they could buy at a local Walmart store and just shoot up about a bunch of people for no reason whatsoever other than the fact that they watched it in a video game or their friend dared them to do it, or there's some type of built-in hate that's based on nothing. No other time in history has such a thing happened. No one in history went out there and said, you know what? I hate everyone, and just walked into the park, walked into the market with a sword and just started killing everybody. It just never happened. You're not going to find stories like this in any of the books, including the mythical tales. But in this generation, it's once a week. You have here in America school shootings. Now, although racism and all types of other vile crimes are as old as time, the type of crime, the type of mentality that's in schools, that's in regular high-level, society neighborhoods, is the same as the ones that you have in the low-level society, in the low-level housing and so on. Meaning, there is no difference between the vile things that are happening to the rich as there are to the poor. In past generations, there was a significant class difference where, yes, money has always been different. There was poor, there was rich, but the problems usually were different too. While one was starving, the other one was overeating. Today it's very different. Today the problems are the same. It seems like there's as much murder in Washington, D.C., and in politics, and in media, and in Hollywood, as there is in the projects, and in literally in gangster neighborhoods. It seems like the world is upside down, and no one is calling foul enough to say, you know what, we have to change. Everyone wants a specific person to change, a specific position to change. But the reality is that this has nothing to do with politics. Politics won't change it, even if you bring the best politicians that man can find. It won't change anything. The crime that's happening in Eretz Yisrael, the government is targeting its own citizens. While people complain about Israel being against the Arabs, anyone that lives in Israel, anyone that's actually familiar with what's happening in Israel, would quickly realize that the government hates the Jews that are religious much more than it hates the Arabs. And in fact, even the seculars they hate. But they love the Arabs. The very same Arabs that ran over a few people and killed them last week, and killed a bunch of more a few days before that, and killed a bunch of more a few days before that, and commits terrorism on a regular basis, that very same person, that very same nation, if you want to call it, the government favors them. One of the ways that we see it is the outcome of terrorism. The outcome of terrorism in Eretz Yisrael is one of the most embarrassing things that ever happened to Israel as a nation. Where the police shows up to the place where the Arab ran over 2 children, an adult, killed a few people. He's trying to keep going back and forth, running over more people. Careless about the fact that there are 4 policemen with guns drawn right next to him. He keeps going. And no one shoots him. Why? All 4 policemen are scared to shoot. Because they know that if they shoot him, and this is not precisely according to the judges, communist judges that they have there in Israel, if they don't determine that this was real, the risk was already over, they would actually try the police officer for murder, and they would put the police officer in jail for the rest of his life, like they did that soldier. And like they do others that are actually trying to defend the people. So you ask, how did the terrorist eventually die? A civilian killed him with a rock. Now in other places where you saw a different Arab stabbing a bunch of people, shooting a bunch of people just in the last couple of weeks, there were policemen there, didn't do anything. They were scared to shoot them. But if you remember the endless amount of videos that we got of how the very same police nearly killed a bunch of religious Jews for not wearing a mask. So if you kill people as an Arab, we're scared to shoot you. But if you're a religious Jew not wearing a mask, we have no problem in killing you. Now, if you're going to tell me this is a government problem, you're mistaken. If you're going to tell me this is an Arab-Israeli problem, you are mistaken. If you're going to tell me this is a society problem, you're also mistaken. This problem is 100% spiritual. When you have people incline themselves to be more like the animals than they are the man that they were created to be, that original seed has so much filth in it that what do you expect it to produce? when people are more promiscuous by the time they're teenagers than literally entire families were with their own wives in previous generations, what do you expect to come out? When people frown upon teachings of holiness, even if they themselves claim to be religious, but yet they ask you, why do you always talk about this? As if this is like a newfound issue. As if literally every other page in the Gemara, every other page in all over the Torah doesn't talk about this in some aspect or another. As if holiness is some new issue, unique to this generation. The reality is that if a person doesn't take this stuff to heart, then they'll frown upon teachings that are very fundamental to correcting the problem that we have in the world. And that's why you see things that may seem like not a big deal, in reality happen in every other home. For example, this very same bed that's supposed to be holy, that's supposed to be a vessel for you to serve your Creator, for you to potentially produce a special soul, for you to potentially fulfill your marriage obligations, for you to potentially get the rest that's necessary to serve Hashem even better. Instead of looking at it that way, you look at the bed as a canvas for all types of crimes, not just the obvious crimes of adultery, promiscuity, wasting seed and the like, but even crimes that you do while you're married, such as buying bed sheets with some soccer player or football player's image on it. Now some of you are probably laughing. Wait, there's something wrong with that? Yes. You put another man, a picture of another man on your bed. Why would you think that's a good idea? That your wife has the image of some other man on the bed. Or opposite, another woman as a bed sheet. Why would you think that it's good for your husband to have another woman in there? Or the worst yet, it's not on the bed, it's on the walls. People put pictures of all types of celebrities on the walls of their bedroom. All types of animals on the walls of their bedroom. Why would you think that's a good thing? The Midrash says that at the time of Rabbi Akiva, one king nearly killed the queen because their baby turned out much darker than they are. And he was sure that his wife committed adultery. Rabbi Akiva was asked to come before the king officially kills the queen. And of course, Rabbi Akiva, the teacher of Am Yisrael, quickly understood the problem. And he said to the king, Your Highness, do you have pictures or sculptures in your bedroom? And he says, Sure I do. He says, Do they happen to be dark? And he says, Yes, but why the difference it make? What kind? Well, I got these special statues that we received as a gift from a friend of mine who's the king in Africa. Rabbi Akiva says, Oh, so you have no fault. Your wife is not at fault. Your Highness, your wife has eyes. And while she was together with you, those eyes looked at what you have in the room. And what our eyes saw affected what came out of her body. And thereby, you have a darker kid. She didn't cheat on you. Now, the average person today would think this is ridiculous until they do enough research and realize that this is very much real. When a person puts all types of characters, especially impure people, on their bed, around their bed, all they're doing is magnifying the impurity in their life. Even more so, when a person treats their bed as if it's public property, They let anybody that wants to sleep there, sleep there. It's a mistake. Even generosity in hosting guests has its limits. If you have 100 rooms in your house and you want to allow everybody to go into the rooms and feel free, you have to make one exception. No one is allowed in the parents' bedroom. Not to sleep there, and quite frankly, not even to go visit and see what's in there. I know that it's common for people to show their house, especially if they have a nice house or they have new guests, and they show people the bedrooms, and they show people the living room, and they show people the showers, and they show people the elevator. I know, I used to do it myself too. You live in a $5 million house, you want to show people stuff. I remember. Don't show people your bedroom. Don't show them the bedroom. Don't let them sleep in the bedroom. Why? This is like Kodesh Kodashim in the Bet HaMikdash. Not everyone's allowed in. Now, if you have little kids, that's not a problem. They can sleep in their beds if they want. It's not a problem. But I'm talking about other adults. There's no reason for any of them to ever be in your bedroom. Needless to say, to ever sleep there. Now, some people that are very holy are even sensitive to what happened in the room. So much so that they many times refuse to sleep in hotel rooms. Because even though they change the bed sheets in the hotel rooms, or at least they say they do, if enough filth happened in that bedroom, which if it's a hotel today, certainly filth happened there, and a lot of it, then that filth is still there. That spiritual filth is still there. And some holy people can sense it, and it can affect them. Now, why do I tell you all of this? Because each and every single one of these things is not just something that can affect your life in the long run, but rather it's things that can affect you in the short run in ways that you won't feel right away. Because these are the type of things that can damage the seed. Sometimes damaging it to the point where the seed dies and you can't have kids. Sometimes putting a small, tiny defect on that seed. And instead of you having a precious, holy kid come out that respects the parents, that loves the parents, you have some little troll terrorizing the parents for absolutely no reason. And nothing ever good ever coming out of them. These small little details are what the holy people were concerned about. Now, of course, if you're worried about the small details, there are other things that can help you accustom yourself to accepting these small details, such as your regular behavior outside of the bedroom. One of the things that's very important in Judaism is how a person protects their eyes. Their eyes are their windows to the soul. What you see, whether a man or a woman, is what's going to impact your neshama. What impacts your neshama, it's what's going to impact what comes out of it, what seed comes out of you, what egg, what you produce. If a man looks at everything and anything, you can be sure nothing good will come out of that person, only sins. The Gemara in Masechet Brachot, page 61a, says that it's prohibited for a man to walk behind a woman. It's called Achrei Isha. Because when a man walks behind a woman, close enough where he can see her body move, it creates all types of inappropriate thoughts. So much so that Rabbi Yochanan said that it's better for you to walk behind a lion than a woman. So much so that the Gemara says that a person that accustoms themselves to constantly walk around behind women, constantly surround themselves with all types of immodest women, has no share of the world to come. The Gemara in Masechet Sotah, page 22a, says a person that's a bull, doesn't have Torah, doesn't read Torah, doesn't study Torah, doesn't study Mishnah. The Torah says about him, I shall sow the house of Israel and the house of Judah the seed of man and the seed of an animal. The animal is referring to him. If you don't have Torah, you'll be referred to in Shamayim as an animal. Why an animal? Because you'll see that the things that are in front of you as tools of arousal rather than creations of your Creator. People that can produce holiness. The Shulchan Aruch paskins this to halacha in Even HaEzel, chapter 21, halacha number 1, that a man is prohibited from walking behind a woman, even if she's completely dressed in a modest way. Needless to say, if she's not modest. How much space does he have to have between him and a woman? It should be at least 4 amot, which is about 8 feet. Some say it should be more. The Aruch HaShulchan in Even HaEzel, chapter 21, halacha number 2 says that there are some poskim that say that since today it's commonplace for there many women to be in the streets, and a person has to function, the only way to function is by simply having your head down at all times and only seeing within the 4 amot around you. Short distance in front of you, short distance on the left, right, that's it. That's the only way for you to protect these windows to your soul, to make sure that the seed that comes out of you, the egg that comes out of you, whatever comes out of you is going to be good. Now, if a person is in line and he has to stand behind a woman and there's no other choice, then he should step back a little bit and turn to the side and look down the whole time. Look sideways. Don't stare at the woman in front of you. Needless to say, don't chit-chat, become friends. Why? All of those things will lead you to inappropriate thoughts. Judaism does not believe in platonic relationships. We call it atomic relationships, not platonic. Those relationships, those friends between man and woman, only lead to problems. You want to be friends with your wife. Be friends with your husband, not somebody else's wife or somebody else's husband. Now, sitting behind a woman is allowed, especially if you can't see her because she has a high chair, but if you can see her, and especially if she's immodest, then it's forbidden. Unless you can simply position yourself in a way that doesn't see her. But if this is going to be on a regular basis, you work in one of these offices that doesn't have cubicles, you can't see any, you can see everything. If you're going to be positioned next to an immodest woman on a regular basis, either change seat or change jobs. Or just prepare yourself for Genom. Whichever one you want. Now, woman also has responsibility. If you're walking and you see that there is men right behind you, move to the side, let them pass you. Move to the side, let them pass you. One of the places we see this in the Torah itself is in a story in Genesis, chapter 24, verse 61, where it says that and when Eliezer, Eved Avraham, and Rivka were coming back home to have Rivka marry Yitzchak, it says that Rivka and our female servants got up and went behind the man Eliezer. And the Gemara in Masechet Brachot, page 61a says, it's not a coincidence that they went behind Eliezer. It's teaching us that they had to go behind Eliezer because it's prohibited for him to go behind them. From there we learn that these rules are not just something that was made up today just to torture the generation. These rules are already inside the Torah from 3,334 years ago. And if you could apply them in your day-to-day life, you could certainly apply them in those places of holiness called the bedrooms. Take this to heart because surely it will benefit you. And Be'ezrat Hashem, the shiur will be the strength you need, the reminder you need to do exactly just that. And you are happy to let us know the good news when those precious fruits come to life, and you're there to celebrate it. Thank you very much for learning with me. May Hashem bless each and every single one of you. If you want to support, donate, volunteer for our organization, anything that you could do to help us, please go to the websites bezrathashem.org or bhtorah.org, and Bezrat Hashem, we'd be happy to hear from you. Call to B'cha B'atzlacha, and Bezrat Hashem will learn again tomorrow.